I know that this video's title is inflammatory. That was the whole point. But before you go down to the comments and write whatever zinger you came up with a few seconds after reading it and clicking on this video, I simply ask that you hear me out. Because what I can promise you from the arguments I'm about to make in regards to this topic, I sincerely believe that it will have a lot more nuance than you originally thought. The point of this video is not to say that bigots deserve to have their stories told and that those who suffer from them need to hear their stories personally, but that we as storytellers have a duty to explore this topic thoroughly for the sake of those who are listening, especially with regards to children's entertainment. Also, I don't actually condone bigotry. I can't believe I have to say that, but, you know, just in case you thought this video was going down that road, yeah, I'll just nip that in the bud real quick. Now that I've made myself clear, on with the video. In today's political climate, one of the key things that we see online nowadays is this rampant increase in hostility. Whether it's people who make post after post telling us the horrors of white supremacy or the dangers of gay and trans people, bigotry, the subject of this video, is everywhere now. You practically can't escape it at this point. And where we see people fighting this form of hatred the brightest is in the realm of fiction. And in the case of this video, kids media. I'm sure you have heard of a few modern shows that are now infamous for trying their hand in fighting against bigotry. Some examples being High Guardian Spice, Dead End Paranormal Park, and Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, with the last show having a whole episode surrounding transphobia that never got aired, and was eventually released to the internet for the world to see what they could have gotten officially. This episode in question was met with a myriad of responses, from fans crying foul and saying that it was a crime that this episode never got released and were up in arms when the show eventually got cancelled, to critics who viewed the episode and said it was a story that was way too preachy and pushed a message that was more harmful than empowering. There was also some people saying the show is LGBT propaganda, but people who know me and my content understand that I value these takes about as much as that piece of dog feces that keeps clinging onto the sole of my shoe no matter how much I try to scrub it off. To the newcomers, hi, I'm someone who actually criticizes content with principles. Now that I've seen the episode for myself and thought back to all the other shows I mentioned that tried to tackle the very sensitive topic of bigotry, I find myself siding with the critics who called out Moon Girl's banned episode for having very poor writing. And what I want to discuss through this episode, and by also bringing up an episode from another show called Static Shock, is how bigotry can be handled badly and handled well in fiction, and create tales that can stand the test of time rather than being a blip in the zeitgeist of endless content. To begin my assessment, there are 3 questions that I use that helps me quickly see how the topic of bigotry is handled in a story. Question 1. Does the bigot have a reason to be bigoted? It's a simple enough first question, it speaks for itself in all honesty, which is why I put it as my first question when it comes to bigotry-related narratives. Most, if not all, stories pass this first test, but it's question 2 that starts to make things interesting. Question 2. Does the story give the bigot a chance to explain themselves? Whether it's through actions or straight-up dialogue, if a story allows the bigot to express why they believe a certain way, it supplies the audience an insight into what happened to the character. The reasons can be anything from small grievances, misunderstandings, to life-changing events, and even trauma. But regardless, the bigotry is at least given a spotlight to show you how it got there. But these 2 questions, while they can be answered fairly easily when applied to these stories, have one last hurdle to go through. One that, in my mind, makes or breaks a story tackling bigotry. That question being, question 3. Does the story care for the bigot? Despite the bigot having a flawed view of the world, does the writing allow the audience to see this character as a complex one one that despite this flaw have a few good qualities going for them as well? Could their bigotry have come from personal experiences and shaped them into the person they are? And if something or someone were to challenge them, could they possibly learn to grow and change? Question 3, I feel, is the most important question to ask when it comes to bigoted stories, because while writers may sometimes have the character not change out of their bigoted ways, it shows that there was at least some thought and care being put into making the character more real and sympathetic. The answering of this question, to me, is what makes a story have staying power. It's what makes an audience think about the message even after not having seen it for years. So with this structure I created that I feel is perfectly fair and reasonable, let's take the first example of the 2 shows I've picked to talk about, with my first example being an older show that is seen as very good by a lot of people, Static Shock. And let's see if I can answer these 3 questions I laid out towards the bigoted character, Sean Foley. Question 1. Does the bigot have a reason to be bigoted? Sean is a police officer in Dakota City, and from this job, he's seen and experienced many of the bad that comes out of the city he patrols. He's seen all kinds of crime, both small and supernatural, and from this life of establishing order, he has developed this severe hatred of criminals, both street rats, rebellious teens, and specifically for the premise of this episode, black people. So we have the reason, so how does the show go about explaining his reasoning? Question 2. Does the story give the bigot a chance to explain themselves? Throughout the episode, Sean has multiple scenes of him explaining what he finds wrong with the world of Dakota City. He believes that rap music inspires kids to be disrespectful against their parents, making them want to spray on walls, stay up past curfews, and tear down everything that guys like him built. He sees the city in ruin all the time, and desperate for a sense of order, he bans rap music in his own house, so that inside his walls, he can establish a sense of order and integrity. He complains about how much he has to deal with during the job, and claims that Virgil is a bad influence on his son, Richie, saying that Virgil is the reason why Richie acts so rebellious, ending the rant with this one very brutal line.
It's bad enough I gotta deal with them all day long. Now one of them's in my house.
As Richie goes missing, there is a moment between Sean and Virgil's father, Robert, and Sean believes that Virgil is lying about not knowing where his son went, calling him and black people thick.
And you trust him knowing how thick they are?
Maybe you don't trust your son enough.
After being asked by Robert on if he asked any other of Richie's friends about his son's whereabouts, Sean admits that he doesn't know any of them, saying that Richie goes on and on about Virgil and his cool dad, saying that Richie never told him that Virgil's father was black, which Robert rightfully calls out as it not being an issue. When Sean dismisses this attack on his ideology, he goes out to try and find his son, but Robert insists that he go with him, saying that he has an idea on where he might go, and considering that he talked to outcasts all his life, it makes complete sense. And even though Sean doesn't want his help, the two make their way to the underground, where Robert successfully gets more information about Richie, Sean's bigotry being further cemented when he sees and gets made fun of by a teenager after he says that the people here live like pigs.
Look at them, living like pigs. Little punk.
As Robert gives him some insight on what causes good kids to go against their parents, Sean dismissively asks if this is Robert trying to connect these hooligans with his relationship to his son, which Robert promptly ignores, focusing on the task at hand. As the two men get closer to the lair holding Richie, Sean makes another comment about how ungrateful the people of the city are, saying that even after putting a roof over their heads and feeding them 3 square meals a day, they cause the buildings they live in and society as a whole to deteriorate around them. And it's after this small jab does Robert finally confront Sean on his bigotry, starting off the speech by saying that Richie was not the only boy who ran away from Sean on the night Virgil stayed over. After being met with this very confrontational line, Sean tries to backtrack, saying that he wasn't talking about Virgil that night, a very classic excuse used by those caught in the act. but Robert sees right through it, and tells Sean that he was talking about Virgil's kind, his kind, and that Robert says that he's seen Sean's kind all his life, people he calls fine, upstanding bigots, who in a world that tries to get better with time, remain ignorant to it, and worse yet, they're proud of it. It's a brutally humbling moment for Sean to go through, and the show gave him a lot of moments to explain why he feels the way he does, but as the episode progresses, these moments of explanation for Sean's character go away, so I'll end my answering of this second question here. But the reason why I find this episode to be a superb piece of television is how the show went about answering my third question. Because even though Sean has so far not been looking very good to the eyes of the audience, the episode showed, clear as day, that the story cared for Sean. Sean is a man who has lived a hard life. His cycle of intolerance, as Robert put it, was most likely caused by generations of suffering in the Foley bloodline. Sean has probably experienced many things that helped only enforce and justify his toxic worldview. Dakota City has proven to be a place that is riddled with crime, and with superpowers being added into the mix, Sean has probably witnessed things that even he would not have the stomach to retell to anyone. Now, this is all headcanon, and I'm fully aware that the episode didn't show me any of this happening to Sean directly, but the reason I believe this to be the case is due to how Sean talks about all these things in the moments where he expresses his hatred of black people and their culture. As he talks, there's this sense that at some level, Sean had direct experience to go off of. This mindset feels like it was shaped due to years upon years of anger towards trying to establish order, only to be met with horrific rebellion. Not as a mindset that was given to him by someone else, or by stories he read about in the newspapers or watched on the news. Sean talks like a man who's been through the crossfires, and these experiences, while they do not justify him painting an entire race of people in a bad light, gives us an explanation as to why Sean acts this way, with the writing not showcasing a man who's stupid and nonsensical, but misguided and hurt. This hurt that Sean feels as a result tears his own family apart. His desire for order and peace causes him to ignore and not understand his own son, who he shows a very strong disgust to when it comes to his interests in rap music. Sean's bigotry blinds him to the good-hearted kid that his son is, despite his father. Richie is not allowed to express himself inside the walls of his own house, and the two have such a hollow relationship that Sean doesn't even know about any of Richie's friends besides Virgil and his cool dad, which he dismisses as being childish and immature. Sean's bigotry consumed him so much that he forgot that first and foremost, his most important job is not to fight crime or cast judgment onto the guilty, but to be a parent for his child. A present one who sees him, empathizes, acknowledges, and loves him. The reason why I believe that the speech Robert gives in the rundown house is such an excellent takedown of Sean's bigotry is that it wasn't just to tell Sean that he failed in adapting to the times around him, but that in his bigotry, he failed in being a good parent towards his son, narrowing the scope of the problem down to a very deeply personal one that affects Sean himself rather than society at large. A scope that Sean can't look away from. If Robert didn't connect Sean's racism to the way he treats his son, then his whole spiel about the fine, upstanding bigot would not have hit as hard as it did, because to Sean, he's not personally affected by his bigotry. But when he realizes that someone else was affected, someone that deep down he really cares about and is just trying to protect him in the only ways he knows how, he starts introspecting and sees some very uncomfortable truths about himself. In this speech, Sean is exposed to the man he has truly become, a fine, upstanding bigot that preaches virtue without actually practicing it himself, at least not in the ways that it truly matters. But above all, Sean is a father who has failed his son. The story's care to subtly and outwardly showcase this kind of flaw to Sean's character shows the insanely great attention to the smaller details of his personality. Underneath his bigotry lies a man who has lost his way thanks to his hatred. A man who's doing what he believes is right and has done a lot of good as a police officer, but is clouded by his prejudice. This is why him saving Virgil during the final fight and apologizing to his son as he embraces him hits so hard. When you take a minute to think about his character, Sean always had the potential to be a good man. And to an extent, he was. If you take the racism angle out, Sean has done a large amount of good. He has a good job, good house, a loving wife, Richie certainly doesn't look like he's being underfed, and he's seen as a respectable person in the workforce, with Robert talking to him as an equal and not a child. Static Shock, in short, cared about Sean. His character was given time to be understood, reasoned with, called out, and changed. His arc by the end of the episode didn't feel forced, but earned. He saw the error of his ways and is taking steps to change them. What I like about the end of the episode is that it isn't a scene where Sean outwardly apologizes to Virgil for the things he said about him, but it was him showing interest in his own son's hobbies. Sean at this point in the plot doesn't need to apologize. His handshake with Virgil and his drive to be there more for his son is doing more than enough to show that he's changing for the better. He's becoming a better man, but most importantly, a better father. Something that his bigotry was preventing him from doing. Static Shock treated the bigotry of Sean as the complex mess that it can oftentimes be, where good, hard-working people who are otherwise great members to a society get washed up and drown in a cycle of finding demons among their fellow man. Bigotry narrows their mind and makes them forget things that are infinitely more important, like jobs, friends, and family. And because of that, Static Shock's racism episode is hailed by many as a fantastic piece of television, and is one that even 25 years later remains as relevant now as it was back then. All because the story took some time to care about Sean. So with Static Shock passing all 3 tests with splendid wit and ease, let's now bring up the banned episode of Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, which contains the character Miss Greer. And I will now apply the same 3 questions to this episode in as good faith as possible, since I want this video to remain fair. Question 1. Does the bigot have a reason to be bigoted? Miss Greer's bigotry spawns in when she finds out that the character Brooke, one of the members of the rival volleyball team, is transgender. And not only that, she was a boy who had originally played for a boys' soccer team back in the day. Miss Greer sees this as Brooke having an unfair advantage over the other girls, which of course causes her to strike. So we have the reason. Fair enough. Now how does she justify it? Question 2. Does the story give the bigot a chance to explain themselves? As the episode plays out, the main line of argumentation that Miss Greer uses is the idea of fairness. Since Brooke is a character that was originally a boy, it is not a massive leap in logic to say that Miss Greer believes that Brooke could have physical advantages over the other players, which would make the inciting game unfair to one side. Miss Greer's character desperately does what she can to prevent Brooke from playing in the game, and when confronted by her daughter about where the team went, she said that she's doing all of this in the name of fairness, which from her perspective as a woman, having a former boy on a girl's team would sound like an unfair advantage, especially if the person has no idea what being trans is actually like, which I assume this character doesn't given what I know about her. But while Static Shock took Sean's character and gave us a resounding yes when asked if the story cared about his own struggles, Moon Girl takes this question, laughs in its face, and loudly and proudly says, no. The story does not care for Miss Greer's motivations, nor her concerns. She was not written to be understandable, sympathetic, or even likable, but as ignorant, selfish, and cruel. The story treats her bigotry of Brooke not as a case of two characters not seeing eye to eye, but like a monster playing with its prey. The monster fueled with endless malice, ill intent, and an intense desire to destroy their victim in the worst ways possible, creating games that break the victim down to a crumbled heap. Miss Greer was written not to be misunderstood, but to be hated, jeered at, and humiliated for having such disgusting opinions of trans people. The story did not have a care in the world to make her more complex, more reasonable, more interesting, more anything. The only thing the story cared about and wanted to tell you outright was that progressivism is good, and bigotry is bad, expecting you to clap and cheer as the victim overcomes their oppressor in a story that handled its concept about as poorly as one could imagine, leaving this banned episode as a story with nowhere near the same staying power as Static Shock. Moon Girl's story feels like it's unfinished, and the reason why I believe this is due to one of my biggest problems with a bunch of modern writers' portrayals of bigotry: the lack of nuanced writing. The problem with bigoted characters like Miss Greer is that they aren't written like people. They are created solely as a way for the writers to indulge in this one-sided narrative that paints their heroes as the good guys and their enemies as demons in human skin. These stories are not written to actually tackle bigotry head-on and create something that could potentially start a dialogue, but instead is a self-worshipping power fantasy that lets them finally have power over their bullies. It is not about understanding, dialogue, debate, or even tolerance, but it's all simple revenge. If the bigots would just get mocked and beaten, then the victims can finally call it even. If the problem can just be squashed and destroyed, then it's perfectly fine. These characters will never change, so what's the point in making them go through any kind of arc? Let's just create the monster and have our heroes destroy them, regardless of how these actions would realistically affect their enemies going forward. Where in their time of defeat, their preconceived notions of what they thought is now only justified, radicalizing them further into a spiral of hatred. To expand on this point, look at Moon Girl's story and try to watch it from the perspective of someone who might share Miss Greer's viewpoint. Or if you can't do that, for whatever reason, try to imagine showing this episode to someone you want to educate that has this opinion. Here we have a story that tackles the very complex issue of trans people being in sports, and the idea of fairness in the sport is being given towards this unreasonable, crazy, psycho lady that does whatever she can so that the trans player can't play. Already, this view of wanting fairness in sports, one that for most people comes from a place of good faith, is being something that is vilified and demonized by the writing. This story is making it perfectly clear that it thinks that anyone who holds this opinion is stupid, uneducated, and naive. So already, you've lost the good faith of that audience. Now imagine yourself or that person with this mindset still, and now you watch an episode where the trans character, one that people in the show argue has no physical advantages over her peers, plays the virtual game and completes it with very minimal help, showing that her skills are greater than the rest of her group. Trans women are not better than women, bigots, don't be so ignorant, so to fight that viewpoint, let's show you a trans woman being better than her peers. Do you see the problem here? Now this could be a case where the episode wanted to highlight Brooke, and she's probably not as great as the others in the actual show. I'm willing to admit my ignorance here. Coming completely clean, this is the only episode of Moon Girl I've ever seen. So if she's handled differently in the other episodes, tell me in the comments. I'm more than open to being wrong here. There is also the point in the climax that I know some of you will bring up where all the people work together to destroy the game, which yes does show the trans character needing help. I know that. I'm not stupid. But that ending doesn't suddenly ruin the point of Brooke easing the game before. That still wasn't a good idea. But moving back to the original point, as Brooke and the others get out, again, imagine yourself or another person as someone who has the belief of wanting fairness in sports, and then listen to this last thing that Brooke says.
Doesn't matter how many doors people like you slam in my face. With my fight, plus my crew backing me up, I'm always gonna find my way out. Oh, and remember when I said I was on the soccer team? No!
Now, if you were a bigot, and you just watched something like that happen to a person that represents you, done by a person that you had negative opinions about before, what do you think would happen to you? Would this make you see the light? Would you apologize? Would you want to do better? Or is it possible that your human instincts would naturally kick in at full swing, and this event would not only solidify your hatred, but you would come out of it hating the people you hated even more? To go back to Static Shock for a second, because the story actually treated him like a human being, Sean as a result did see the light about how he sounded and acted around Virgil and Richie. He did apologize to Richie for pushing him away and non-verbally apologized to Virgil through his actions, and he did want to be a better man for his son and his community. Sean was allowed the chance to be better, and he took it. There is no doubt in my mind that if you were to ask him if after everything he went through in that episode, he still hated black people, he would say no, because the story actually gave him a chance to change. This is something I cannot say about Miss Greer. The whole story with her was just a giant humiliation session for her. She wasn't actually proven wrong about anything she believed, only that she just shouldn't have those opinions because they aren't acceptable in today's society. She wasn't given any chance for a redemption, no chance to see the error of her ways, no chance to even explain why she believed this view so strongly that she went to these drastic measures to stop Brooke from playing. Instead of the story doing any of that, she was instead made an example out of by the writing. That this is how you should be treated if you have this kind of opinion on trans people. Because yes, heaven forbid a topic as complex and interesting as trans people in sports be treated with even the tiniest ounce of nuance and care. Heaven forbid there is an actual conversation that could be had. The writers could have had something truly special here if their bias just wasn't so obvious towards one side. To these writers, bigots are a whole separate species, one that can't be reasoned with or even understood, so it's better to just make them out as simple fools that have egos that need to be taken down a peg. And for me, that lack of nuance towards the topic of bigotry is why I have a problem with a bunch of these modern stories. Bigoted characters are not, in short, treated like characters. They break every single rule towards storytelling. To get a bit more personal with this video, what I personally believe is that bigotry is not a thing that people have the moment they are born. Matter of fact, in the first world, I firmly believe that without any outside interference, a majority of the population would grow up as people who would be accepting of all kinds of people, cultures, and backgrounds. From just living their lives, people communicate, learn, and connect to people of all kinds, and that leads to a large group of people who are very kind and open-minded. We are not as tribalistic as some make us out to be. We do have this idea of empathy, and a lot of us practice it very well. However, the world is a cruel place. Things outside of our control happen to us all the time, and these events in our lives can and will change us permanently. And it's through these events that people start to change, sometimes for the better, but oftentimes for the worse. In Static Shock, we were subtly told that story with Sean's character, To reiterate everything I said before, he is a man that sees the worst of humanity daily. He's probably seen things that he will take to his grave, and that shapes him into the man he was in that episode. One wherein trying to defend his family, but mostly himself from the evils of the world, he starts affecting those he cherishes, like his own son, pushing him away without even knowing it. He was given, in short, a character. One with flaws, absolutely, but also many good qualities that were always there, but were just overshadowed by his bigotry. If you took out the bigotry, Sean still had character. Miss Greer, on the other hand, has no character. If you took out her bigotry, you are left with nothing. She is merely a stand-in that the writers used to represent transphobia, and without that fueling this character, she would disappear into the background quicker than you could blink. In short, she is a terribly written antagonist. But she didn't need to be. There's something that I got from this episode that if I just gave it a bit more spotlight, I feel like this would change everyone's perception of Miss Greer's character instantly. That being the care for her daughter. So let me pitch a story to you. What if, in Miss Greer's life, the reason that gave her this fairness mindset was because she had to deal with tons of discrimination of her own? Here is my idea of a backstory that could be given to Miss Greer. Miss Greer was a girl who loved to play sports when she was younger. She had a knack for it and did what she could to hone her skills, but given that times for her were way less progressive than they are now, she had to go through a whole lot of hurdles to even get on a team. During this time, she was bullied relentlessly, both by boys who saw her as weak and girls who saw her as acting too boyish. There could have even been a moment where she demanded that she play with the boys, only to get completely humiliated by everyone there, where she learned just how unfair it was for the two sexes to play against each other. From this life, Miss Greer saw and experienced the ways that girls get treated in sports, and so, to try and enact some change, Miss Greer fought for her entire life to create her own teams of only girls, and eventually started her own league, where she became the first person to have an all-girls sports team. It could even be a whole point that her journey inspired great change across the country, and it helped many other female teams to form and become more popular. And with her fighting tooth and nail to make this dream become a reality, Miss Greer also tried to pave the way for her daughter, Bella, so that she could get the chances that she never got when she was her age. And if a mother was to do all of this for her child, and then sees a trans person playing for the enemy team, what do you think would go through Miss Greer's mind, given her past from playing with boys before? Now with this whole backstory, suddenly Miss Greer's actions throughout the whole episode make way more sense. With this past, her being so adamant on making sure Brooke can't play suddenly has this tragic weight to it. Brooke was originally a boy, and so had, and arguably still has, physical advantages over the girls in the volleyball team. She certainly showed off how capable she was during the whole episode, with her getting all the keys with minimal help and managing to figure out mostly everything on her own, a point I mentioned earlier. But the point is, Brooke to Miss Greer in this iteration of her character is a part of her past that comes rushing in with a new coat of paint. Her daughter is now in danger of going through the same unfairness that Miss Greer did when she was young. And this scares her. So she does this very terrible act as a way to protect the child that she cares about very dearly. Despite the malice and rage, in Greer's heart of hearts, she believes she is doing the right thing. She doesn't want history to repeat itself, and so shuts down any possibility of it ever happening again. With this kind of premise, suddenly a lot of the evil faces she makes now has this veil of terror, fear that she disguises as malice and ignorance. And what if, and this is me really pushing the boat here, what if there was a moment inside the game where Brooke actually got a chance to see this past? How do you think this would change her view towards Miss Greer? Now this is going off just the one episode I've seen of Moon Girl, but even despite Brooke's cathartic beating down of Greer in the end of the episode, I would think that had she understood the reasoning behind Greer's actions, she would at the very least see where she's coming from. And instead of the episode's climax being this self-indulgent power play, what if it was instead done like this?
How is this possible? The game had rules. How did they—
Miss Greer, your game was very clear with its rules. I'll admit you've almost defeated us. If we didn't break the game, we would have never gotten out. I don't respect what you did. But I do get why you did it. During the game, I saw what happened. And I'm so sorry. It's awful that that happened. And I understand that you just want to protect her. But you shouldn't have taken that out on me. It's true that I was a boy once in my life, but I would never, ever want to hurt your daughter.
But what if—
It's not going to happen again. I will make sure of it. You can quote me on that. Just give me a chance. I have enough struggles to deal with already, and it's not fair that this should be one as well. Please? If I see anything, then I will make my voice heard. That's fine. In the meantime, just enjoy the game. By the way, have some more faith in Bella. Just from looking at her, I think that your work has made her stronger than ever. She must have gotten some of that girl power you always talk about. I think she'll be a very good opponent for us. Don't you think? Squirrel Squad, we got a game to play. Now let's beat these guys fair and square. Right! If we didn't break the game, we would have never gotten out. Go get them, Bella.
With this one simple change to the plot, I turned a one-sided argument that preaches the message of inclusion into a story about pain, trauma, misunderstanding, and redemption. I made Miss Greer into a more compelling character that has reasons to be bigoted, but never once did I make it out that she was right for having them. The bigotry is still based off of ignorance, but you can't say it was based off nothing. As someone who loves to tell stories of all kinds, one thing about this art that I love the most is how invested I can get into exploring identities outside of my own. The greatest stories told are ones that, regardless of your upbringing or your culture, you can still find value in the narratives, and on the rare occasion, even gain a new perspective that you never thought about before. Stories are the perfect place to explore these ideas. They are fictional, so no one is actually getting hurt. They are driven by a narrative, so the idea is more streamlined. And the message that the author wants to tell can be expressed in a way that not many other ideas can be shown in any other way. The point of this video was not to make the argument that bigots are deserving of justification. It was not to make the argument that victims of real bigotry must always turn the other cheek and wave off the abuse they suffered like it was entirely invalid. If that was the thing you got out of this video so far, then Yeah, you just haven't been paying attention, have you? Boiled down to its very core point, the argument that I am making in this video is to make your stories better. As a storyteller, you have been given a talent that not many people have. Your words and your worlds could help inspire others to do better and learn to understand the messy world around them, to help them find community in a common interest or goal. That kind of power, in my eyes, is not to be thrown around without thought. If bigotry is a theme in your story, then you should tackle it in the most understanding way that you can. Try to write a plot that allows the audience to understand and maybe even relate to the two opposing parties. And if you want, write it so that both sides, despite their disagreements, at least see the other for what they are. Human beings with their own lives, struggles, concerns, and flaws. And if you don't want to redeem your bigot, because maybe that's just the case, you could write a story that shows how trauma and outside interference can mold or break a character's moral compass to the point of no return. Underneath all the cruelty and the savagery of bigotry is a lot of tragedy. Some people get so poisoned and brainwashed that there is just no saving them. Or, in rare instances, people are just born evil, and bigotry is the method that they use to create the most harm. That kind of character can be very interesting, don't get me wrong, but it's easily the most lazy and easiest to mess up, in my personal opinion. Psychopathic racist characters just sound like something that every single modern writer would try to take advantage of, and they would just always screw it up. And an argument that I've made in a good few videos by now, but it's one that I find to be extremely relevant to this topic, is that people's reasoning for the black and white storytelling is because the audience could potentially be younger and kids wouldn't understand the nuances of such a topic, is a fragile excuse, and it always will be. Kids may be dumb, crass, or even mean in a lot of instances, but what a lot of them have in abundance is empathy. There's a reason why you see the occasional video of two kids from different nationalities bonding, completely mindless to the fact that they're visually and culturally different. Bigotry has had no time to set in. Nothing has yet happened that would change their view of their friend for good. So in my opinion, telling stories about bigotry where both sides are accounted for would be a very good thing to teach kids. It can show them how a person they meet in the future might have become bigoted, why they see the world differently. But above all, it would teach kids to see these people not as monsters to be defeated with brute force, but as human beings that are longing for a sense of community and peace. Empathy can go a very long way, and I know this might be the red-hearted liberal heart of mine screaming as I say this, but I genuinely feel that in a good portion of cases, bigots, if shown more empathy and compassion, can change for the better. I've had opinions in the past that I do not stand by anymore, and these opinions I had were manifested because I went through some bad experiences of my own. But my changing in opinion wasn't because I was bullied or was met with hostility whenever I brought them up. Matter of fact, when this kind of strategy happened, I was, believe it or not, more convinced in my positions. No, what actually did lasting good, what actually got me to see more reason, was that I was treated like a human being. People from different spaces talked to me honestly and sincerely, and through that, showed that I may have been misguided by past slights. And from this, I changed. And I personally believe for the better. To return to the original argument, I want stories to be treated better than just mindless mouthpieces that spew the same bullshit that everyone is tired of hearing. The bullshit that people who already agree with clap like seals, and those who disagree grow more and more isolated with each passing day. Subjects like bigotry are more relevant than ever, And I think it's high time that storytellers, rather than going up in arms to make this global divide worse, instead create stories that can bond people together. And if not that, show the world that these issues are way more complicated than what they're initially believed to be. And if your story is aimed at younger audiences, I know that your excuse of black and whiting the story isn't because you think kids are stupid, but it's because you don't have the skill or the care to create a truly compelling story. Now, I know that this video is very, very liberal in its mindset. I do understand that there are some people out there who hate just for the sake of hating, and these people should be represented in fiction. While it is important to teach kids to be empathetic towards their fellow man, they do also have to understand that there are people out there who simply won't change, who hate not because of trauma or any kind of bad experience, but hate simply to hate. It's important that kids do learn this. It's important for them to know that there are some people out there who will just never change. And it's not always the case that victims have to explain themselves to their oppressors. There's a time and a place to do that, and sometimes it doesn't call for it. But what I personally believe in this instance is that I feel it's better to give your enemies less ammunition than more ammunition. Because even though the enemies themselves won't change, people will see what you are doing and might see you for more than the boogeyman that they painted in their head. You're giving other people a chance to improve, to better themselves. And in my personal opinion, that's a very good thing. I think it's better to rise above your enemies rather than just be another one in their eyes. Maybe I am speaking from ignorance, I don't know. But that's just a principle that I have. And to be honest, I don't ever want to lose that principle. Giving someone a path to redemption, I feel, is always a good idea. And whether they actually redeem themselves or not, you can at least die happy knowing that you gave this person a chance. In this kind of world, where we want to see the best in humanity, giving everybody a chance to redeem themselves, regardless of how bad they have been, is, to my mind, a good idea. Sorry if I'm rambling a little bit, this is completely off script, but I just thought I wanted to get my thoughts out there. I've had a conversation with various people from both sides of this equation, and it's really opened my eyes to a lot of this kind of thing happening. I think both of these viewpoints are valid, and I'm not trying to tell victims that they are not justified in regards to certain acts where violence and self-defense needs to be done in order to protect themselves. I just think that these people should be careful about it. Pick your battles. Think about the optics of what you say and what you do. Plus, I do think that the people who hate for the sake of hating are not going to be watching things like Moon Girl. Some do, sure. You know, you have the people out there who just watch things they don't like for the sake of some clicks and some views. I get that. But in a general sense, the people that I believe you are trying to influence are those who are open-minded. Those people who would be willing to learn about it. To learn about your struggles and how to overcome their sense of bigotry. It's incredibly important to know what kind of audience you're trying to argue with, or talk to, or rationalize with. And if you paint these people as 100% evil, with no redeemable qualities whatsoever, then I think that that is way more damaging, and it doesn't do your side any favors in overcoming the obstacles you're overcoming right now. But those are just my thoughts. You can disagree with that, that's completely fine. I know reality is incredibly complicated, and I'm mainly trying to stick to the world of fiction. because fiction's a lot easier for me to talk about.